Who's calling my phone? Who calling that? Who calling my phone? Who calling that? Who calling my phone? Who calling that? Is it AC? Is it Becky? Is it Keisha? Welcome back, everybody, to the Generation Varied podcast. It is, in fact, none of those people. It is none other than your favorite host, Caleb Norris, welcoming you back. This is the podcast where we discuss business, pop culture, sports, politics, health, everything in between. I'm joined here by my two co-hosts, Ben Okenge and Jack Widener, with our wonderful executive producer in the background, Sophie St. Furman. Gentlemen, how are we doing this week?
I'm doing good. I was traveling, which is why I was not a part of the last episode. Yes, man. Unfortunately, but Peyton did a great job filling in, so
shout out
I'm
Peyton.
glad
shout out my boy Hybo.
Yeah, but yeah, so I was in Houston. It was a lot warmer than here in Columbus. It still wasn't super nice weather, but I'll take it. It was like mid-50s compared to the crisp 13 degrees that I woke up to this morning. And just back to regular business now.
Hey, hold up. I don't want to go ahead and skip that. So you were there for a research conference. Tell us some more about that, because obviously, you are in school for that. And is this related? And is this a competitions? Because I saw some type of scholarship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, yeah, I guess kind of a number of things at play. So the conference itself that I was there for is the American Physical Therapy Association. They have one large conference every year that brings together all the different sections of physical therapy. So it's just like a huge PT conference. Thousands and thousands of people come from around the country and even some internationally to come be a part of this. And a big part of that is like presenting new research that's happening in the field. And so last year I submitted an abstract of my research, and I won. And so I was able to
present.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. So I was able to present some of my research on like a platform, and that was really a really cool experience. Helped me like kind of get my foot in the door as like, I'm like a beginner researcher. So it's really cool to like get these kinds of opportunities while still being so early in my research career. And then also I won a scholarship that's completely unrelated. That was just like a student scholarship for physical therapy students that are like wanting to become next leaders in the profession. And so there's kind of like
That's
two
amazing
things happening there, and both I'm very proud of. And yeah,
as you are presenting the research, did you also like start flexing? Like a competition show.
Used it as an expo for yourself, like and here, if we look at
you just look right over there. Nah, none of that. I keep it very professional. I wore a suit and everything, and like if you know me, I don't like to dress formal, but I did it because when you're a beginner researcher, I guess like in any like profession or career, when you're kind of at that like entry level, sometimes you have to like do a little bit more so that people will take you seriously. And so I think that like I had decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna wear a full suit and tie, which a lot of people do, but I normally wouldn't. But in that situation, I'm like, anything to give me a little more credibility.
I want to see this picture.
All these PhDs, and I'm like,
Jack,
because I'm picturing you wearing a black suit, black tie, and your glasses. And the way
it was a black suit. I wore a purple tie though, tie. But
I was gonna say, based off your facial structure, I'm like, hey, we might be a Malcolm X over here. Like you're building. No, that's funny, so bro. Funny. Well, hey, I'm glad you had a good time. I want to go to Houston because I know, there's some friends out there, but I know the food scene is amazing too. So,
crazy. Absolutely.
But for me, yeah, a pretty good week. You know, Beck, we had a really good. Beck and I had a really good weekend. Just went on really, really long walks. It's one of those walks like I don't know where we're walking to, and I don't know when it's gonna end, but this is nice, and it's nice to have one time to do that, and two somebody to do that with. So that was like a huge highlight. Yeah. What about you, Caleb?
Yeah, no, weekend was good. Weekend was good. Spent it in Columbus, so I had a really good time. My weekend was even better though because some sexy songs for you came out,
The
and
new album.
he did it again. He did it again. Everybody, for those of our listeners who are not familiar with this new album, the Sixth God, aka Drizzy, aka Drake, released a new album. He had like 3 or 4 days of promo from it. And released it. Honestly, I think there was so much buzz going around in the Super Bowl that it was like, you know what? If I'm gonna split off and do something by myself, this is the first album that he released without UMG. Like, why not just keep the conversation going and drop this album specifically for Valentine's Day? Have you guys heard it yet?
Yes, but hold on. You gotta give Party Next Door his flowers as well.
Yes, yes.
This is also a joint album for all the Drake fans out there. Don't be surprised when if you listen and it's not just Drake. I
Yeah.
listened to it. I have some thoughts, but I'll let Jack share first.
I listened to the album, but I didn't listen all the way through. I listened to certain hits. I didn't listen to the whole thing, and so I feel like I can't share my full take. What I will say is, I was listening to Certified Lover Boy because I really enjoyed that album. Was probably one of my favorite ones from Drake, and when this came out, I was like, oh wow, like two Canadian rappers come together. So, but I also just hearing from you guys, just texting each other, like, just how this is a love album too. So I'm curious here, if you both had listened fully, like, yeah, I will say like the only thing, obviously, just always a negative thing to some things, and this is the only thing I want to bring up is I think he has a Spanish song in there. I think that's a part where Drake fans were kind of like laughing about it, just like, oh, Drake shouldn't speak Spanish because he's funny. But that's just what I've heard.
Listen.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but from what I heard, it did sound kind of funny. Not saying the whole album is
that
but,
song, you have
yeah.
to think in context. Who was that? What was that song written for? Who was that song written for? Who?
I'm not sure.
It was written for the girls in Miami that he's trying to be down there that speak Spanish. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't get it, it wasn't for you. You know what I'm saying? It's like that one song.
Oh, that's true.
That wasn't for
That's
you.
so
That wasn't
funny.
for me. I just skip over that one. You know what I'm saying? That's just he wrote this one for the ladies in Miami, and I'm gonna let him have it. That's it.
That's so funny.
I-
Talk about niche.
I thought that the overall album was very solid. I obviously have some favorites over other ones. I think Nokia is really good. I think like the first, I really like tracks. I don't even remember what they're called. I like tracks like 12 through 16 the best. I thought it was really good. I think there are some songs that it's like, like what was that one? But I think for the most part, it sounds like a complete work. I also just think that like Drake just knows the vibe. And this is like, not to bring up the Kendrick like Drake conversation again, but it's like in general, we go to music. It depends on what you go to music for. I think is depending on what you like. I go to music because generally I want to have a good time and I want to be taken out of like, whether it's like work or tasks or like the logistics of my life. And like, I want to have a good time. And Drake just always checks those boxes for me. Always. So I love it. I thought it was a great album.
Caleb, I'm going to say this. You loved the album, And I love that for you. Because that album was trash, bro.
You didn't like it?
I did not like it one bit.
Whoa.
And honestly, it's hard for me to say that because you guys both know how I feel about Drake. I'm the last person that's gonna diss Drake or a Drake album. I think that he gets a lot of hate for no reason. I'm a big fan. But when I listen to this album, I wish I felt what Caleb feels, because I listened to it and the first time through, I was like, was that really what I heard? I was like, all right, hold on. Let me give it a second listen.
Yeah.
And I listened to it through a second time and I was like, this is not getting any better for me. And frankly, like at this point, I'm like, and again, it's hard for me to say this as a Drake fan. I feel like it just was not what I look for in a Drake album. Like, I think in terms of like the beats, I didn't like it. In terms of the flow, I don't listen to Drake for the singing. Like, I'm not with the singing Drake, and there was a lot of that. And then I'm also like lyrically, I can get past the singing if at least what he's saying is something that I can vibe to. But even that, I just wasn't feeling it. Like, it just, honestly, I go back and after I listened to it that second time, I scrolled through and I decided, I'm like, all right, I'm going to put a heart on my Spotify on at least just each song that I enjoy so that I can come back to these. And I made it all the way through the album and I had 0 hearts on it. And man, like, truly, again, I'm being redundant, but it pains me to say it. I just did not enjoy a single song off the album. And I gave it a fair shot. Like, I'm even wearing my Toronto hat today in solidarity for the 2 artists. And I like both of those artists. And I wasn't feeling it.
So I think one of the reasons why you didn't like it is because I think where our tastes differ is because I do lean into the more R&B soul side of hip hop. So it's like if you consider like hip hop like the overarching umbrella, and then within it you have things like rap, sometimes trap, sometimes you get like technically you can make a case that it's all within the hip hop like lens. Yeah. Depending on their beats, depending on the melodic line. I personally do go to music listening for vocals, listening for like, how do I feel when I hear this? Not necessarily like looking at all of the lyrics. And I think you very much are like I want Drake to rap. Like I want Drake to rap.
I do, because I'm not against yeah, it definitely was not. And again, like I'm not even against like melodic hip hop. I really like that, but not from Drake. And so that's, I think, where my issue was. If at least if I felt like what I was expecting it to be was like Party Next Door on the like melodic side of things and then Drake rapping. And it wasn't that. And so maybe that my expectation played into it. But yeah, then honestly, the first time I listened to it, Jack, I got to that Spanish song and I was like, hold up. What's going on? And I cut it off. I needed to take a break. I needed a mental like 5 minutes of clarity before I could get back to it. And I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum. I'm ecstatic that Caleb enjoyed it.
I gotta pull up this track list now.
I can pull it up too, because honestly, I will say Nokia was catchy and I didn't hate it. But it wasn't one that I'm gonna go back to and listen later.
I think one thing, I mean, you both definitely present here is Drake makes a lot of different type of music.
Absolutely,
and there's so much variety that you just don't know what you're gonna get from him when you go to the album.
Right.
And that's the reason I like Certified Lover Boy, because I feel like there's every part of him in that, you know. Him mumbling before the song starts, like him going ham, just like rapping the whole time, or really slow, like slowing down your heartbeat, gets you ready for the second half of the episode. So I feel like this album didn't feel like that for me, which is why I feel like probably why I didn't finish the album, just because, again, I honestly I was listening to the Weeknd's album more than anything else.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I did listen to the Weeknd's album, and that one I enjoyed. It was what I expected. Another Canadian artist.
Wow.
And he did his thing.
I think for me, so first of all, one of my favorite parts of the album, which cracks me up, because if you've ever worked with if you've ever worked in a restaurant specifically, okay, you know that the servers that you work with range everywhere from like a law student who's like prim and proper and like perfect to a medical student who's like they're coming in with a slicked back bun, like they are there to work, they're making their money, they're going home, all the way to like people that was out to like 6 a.m. partying, like drinking, you know, from a bottle from the thing, walking into the restaurant, okay? And all I heard when in that interlude when he was like, y'all need to quit calling them little 1 week breaks celibacy. You are not celibate. You're not celibate. That cracked me up, because anytime a server who needed to get their life together would walk in after like a bender of a weekend, they'd be like, you know what? I'm celibate now. I'm celibate. And it's like, y'all got to stop calling them one little breaks, them week-long breaks, celibacy. And that, I don't know. I just really liked it. But I think I'm just a Drake fan. And like, to me, it felt very much like this Love album gave us a little bit of everything. It gave us a little bit of longing. It gave us a little bit of nostalgia, because he samples himself on a couple of songs from previous albums back in 14 and 16. He sampled himself on some of his own ballads. And so to me, I felt like I got a little bit of a ballad. I got a little bit of a what could have happened had I committed to this one girl. I got a little bit of like, dang, I know like some of these people are just hanging out with me just for the stuff, that kind of stuff. Like I got a little bit of sadness. He connects with his dad on a song. Like I feel like I got all of my life from this album. I really enjoyed it, but I also think that the criticisms of it are very valid, because technically this is an R&B and soul album. It's categorized as that, so I totally get it if it's not what people expected from Drake.
Yeah, no, I think maybe one day I will go back to it and listen with a fresh set of ears, and it'll sit differently with me. And I think it is important to be clear. Like, I'm a Drake fan. I don't hate the album. I just expect more. Like, in terms of the bar is very high, and I thoroughly enjoy a lot of his music. And so it's not that this is like a bad album. It's just that this is the bottom of Drake. I can say confidently this is the least favorite Drake album I've ever listened to.
That's crazy.
But it's, I love a lot of his other albums. Like, it would be hard for me to say which my favorite is, because like the top is so crowded. So
no, that's a good way to put it. So yeah, if you haven't listened to it, I definitely myself need to listen to the full thing. But I definitely want to stay in Canada right now for my topic. So this Saturday, the US and Team USA and Team Canada face off each other in the Four Nations face off in a hockey game. USA beat Canada 3-1. I don't know if you guys had a chance to catch it. So what was going on Saturday? I was watching the NBA All-Star game, just trying to all right, let's see what's going on here. I do like to see my favorite players playing together, because it doesn't happen once a year, and I also get all these texts like, there's a fight. I was like, wait, there's a hockey game? And I haven't watched hockey in a long time. I don't even think I've seen a full game of hockey. But I turned on that game. I switched from All-Star game to this hockey game, and it was already in the second quarter, and it was just, the energy was electric in the arena. And So yeah, I'll kind of take a step back, but what happened during this game, if you didn't have a chance to see it, 3 fights broke out within the first 9 seconds of the game.
9 seconds.
9 seconds,
bro.
And this happened because during the national anthem for the U.S., in the sold-out crowd in Montreal, the Canadian fans booed the anthem, and there has been games where Canadians have booed in the different NHL games since recently, and we'll touch on that here soon. But in this game between Canada and US, obviously big hockey game, hockey teams in hockey countries. Once that happened, it was all hell broke loose. Like the electricity of the game was already super high, but the fight took it to another level. So the four nation face off is so NHL basically decided, the National Hockey League saying, hey, we're not going to do All-Star game this year. We're not going to do it. Let's just have 4 countries, USA, Canada, Sweden, and Finland, have their NHL players play and face each other. And it was a huge success. The US and Canada game peaked at 5.4 million views. This is the most since the Stanley Cup final in 2019. And tomorrow night, as we're speaking on Wednesday, on Thursday is the championship between Canada and US, and they'll be facing each other in Boston, Massachusetts. So the world will be tuning in. Gentlemen, have you seen the game? What's your thoughts on the fight? Because 3 fights within 9 seconds. I mean, it was like the puck moved and then gloves were on the ground. People were spread out. The crowds were standing. Just like, this is honestly the best sport that allows this like tension to be released. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that to me was like very like, oh, I can't remember last time I saw a hockey fight, but let alone a game when it's like between 2 different countries and it's the US and Canada. So there's just so much drama behind this. I don't know. So I'll stop talking. Ben, I want to go to you first. As a Canadian yourself, do you watch hockey a ton? And like, what does this fight like mean to you?
Okay. For starters, I do not watch hockey. I never have, actually. Hockey is super popular in Canada, but I just never got into it. I think it's because, like, African family immigrating to Canada, not necessarily prone to being the biggest hockey fans.
Yeah, black people don't like the cold. We're not even trying to be in the arena that's cold, y'all.
Yeah,
Is it a super expensive sport? I imagine
super expensive.
Okay,
yeah, and that was another thing too.
One of the most
is like
expensive.
if you want to play hockey as a kid, you better come from wealth. We didn't
winter
have
sport,
it like
all
that.
of it, honestly.
Yeah, most winter sports, but hockey in particular, the amount of equipment that you need for it is unreal, and it constantly needs to be changed out. Like, you're getting full new set of everything, like at least once a season. The clubs are expensive. The ice time is expensive. Like, everything about hockey is expensive. And then also just like, I just never really understood it as a kid. So like, I appreciate it enough to where, like growing up in Canada, kids, like, you play hockey in the backyard, like there's an ice rink in
That's
the
so cool.
backyard, and like you just play, like in the summertime you would play pickup basketball, in the wintertime you would play hockey. And so, I have enough appreciation for it like that, but I would definitely not call myself a fan, and I haven't watched a full hockey game in a really long time. But I, similarly to you, was not watching this game, and my phone started lighting up with the same text of like, there's a fight. And then I ignored it. And then I got another text from my other friend. He's like, there's another fight. And so I'm like, what's going on in this game? And I was just tuning into the highlights. And I thought, when I was seeing like, there's another fight, I'm like, oh, it must be second, third period. Tensions are getting hot. No, the puck just dropped. Like, they haven't even played yet, and they're going at it. So yeah, it was pretty nuts. And this is just, I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but this just makes sense given the context, given the tension between these two teams right now.
Mm-hmm.
It was no surprise.
What about you,
Yeah.
Caleb?
Yeah, I am I'm typically pretty like USA all the way, like just in general. I'm definitely not. I don't think in this conversation, just in lieu of all of like the political unrest that's going on and how our country has interacted with Canada in the last even couple of weeks. The taunting of we're gonna annex you guys into America, that kind of stuff. Like I'm just not for any of that. So I was like, when I heard that they was booing, and I heard that they was like ready, I was like, I know that's right, Canada. Like y'all better let somebody know that you ain't going to like it ain't about to go down like that.
Business for real.
Right. I was like, you know what? Stand on business. We like to bully people, don't we, in this country? Like, stand on business. Stand up. I was happy with it. I really was. And I don't think any common sense American can say a thing about it or should be even like pro America in this conversation, because when you like, if you're not familiar with everything that's been going on, I mean like top Canadian officials are like, we're like genuinely preparing for in case we get invaded or something. Like the fact that just a day ago there was a congressman who introduced an actual bill to be in conversations with Denmark to like annex Greenland and turn it into red, white, and blue land. And it's like, I don't even care if it is like a meme or like a joke. It's like, y'all, like, this isn't like what you joke about. So like, I'm all for the Canadians like, oh, you brought it here. Oh, I got something for that ass. Like, I love that. I'm like, heck yeah.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's three different three different angles I want to talk about the story. One is the political climate, and then I want to get into the sports marketing side and the fandom itself. So sticking to the political climate. So if you didn't see the game or the backstory, I don't know where you have been, but basically Canadian fans have been protesting President Donald Trump when it comes to the tariffs on Canada import and his proposal for Canada to become the 51st state. So I guess they Canadian fans, when it comes to like in National Hockey League games, they've been already having this movement. Ben, you kind of shared out with me earlier. It's just like they've been booing at these NHL game, but it led up to this big game. Obviously, they're wearing, first of all, like the jerseys were very sleek. I feel like hockey jerseys can be a miss or hit, but this one's like, oh, this is US. This is a USA, Canada. Like, I guess like most of the hockey fans were really happy how the jerseys turned out. So it definitely had that, like, the scene was set, is what I'm saying, for this to happen. But Ben, tell us about, like, what do you think about all of this? About Canada booing the national anthem?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. I think, well, firstly, this booing thing, it's been happening. This isn't just like a one-time thing. I actually, I have a friend from high school. Shout out Agasha if you're listening to this. She is a singer and an artist out in Vancouver, BC, and she actually got to sing the national anthems at a Vancouver Canucks game. So she sang the Canadian national anthem, did a great job, sang the American national anthem, got booed the entire time.
Wow.
And dealt with it super classy. I read a news article and saw some news clips of her talking about that experience, and I thought she did a phenomenal job handling that tough situation. And it's crazy. Like, I mean, she didn't take it personal because they're not booing her. They're booing this notion of America, right?
See, I'd have took it personal. I'd have been like, oh,
if you were singing the national anthem,
I'd have been like,
you.
Oh, say does that star Spangled, spangled. I
You would have
said
been going back at it.
spangled. Like, I'd have been riffing.
That's so
Turn
funny.
it into a 3-minute song. But nah, I mean, all that to say, this is a pattern. This has been going on, and I think a few things about it. First of all, I think this is the most Canadian thing. Like, like, dude, this is how Canada handles its problems, bro. Like, they're just booing. Like, this is nothing is actually happening. They're not doing anything. There's no real action that's going on about this. They're just talking. And so that's one of my thoughts. My other thought about it is that it's weird to me that it's like they're booing Americans in general for the statement of one American. Like, I don't know, since Trump said that, I don't know of a single other American. I've not heard, at least, a single or seen online any other person in any kind of agreement with Donald Trump on that. I think everyone thinks it was wildly out of line to say that. I think everyone agrees that it's dumb, and so it seems weird to me that the repercussion of, admittedly, the leader of the country, it's not just some American, it's not one random guy, but to take one person's statement and turn it into this whole big thing against the whole country of America is a bit weird. Yeah, and again, it doesn't do anything. And then also, like, do they really think that Americans want to take over Canada? That's my big question with this. Like, like, Canada got enough problems as it is. We don't, like, America does not want Canada. This is not a real scenario. Like, I just do not understand. Do they think this is real? And if America did want Canada, they could walk right in and take Canada. Like, do you realize there is no one that is going to come protect Canada if America wants to just take over that country? Because the people who take care of America, of Canada, is America. And so this is like an alliance that's existed for a long time. And I don't think that there's really ever been like conflict between these two countries, not since 1812. And so it's like, I think people live on the internet and they see this like small comment, and just like internet conversation just blows up into the real world and plays out in really like immature and like poorly thought out ways like this. And I know I just did a lot of ranting.
No, you have every place is, you're Canadian, bro. Like, more. I guess, like, okay, you look like you were gonna say something early. You want to jump in? Because
so my perspective is that so I this was a week ago that I like had kind of, I wouldn't say a deep dive, but like I watched 2 or 3 different segments on this specifically, where like Canadian international affairs people that were familiar with international affairs were speaking. So I can't speak to it in depth, but at the frequency of which they were talking about it and their reasoning for why, there were a lot of people who were familiar with the international affairs that didn't think that it was just like a joke, because they specifically want a lot of the Canadian resources and a lot of the Canadian like minerals, resources, timber, oil, that kind of stuff. And you are absolutely correct. There would be like no major defense that they could have. So if Donald Trump is under pressure, the reason why I think that those conversations are cooling is because he's starting conversations with Russia and has specifically talked about wanting to end the war, and then going directly into a trade agreement with Russia, which then they would have oil and they would have more resources and they would have their timber and their minerals from Russia, right? So I actually think that there are at least people who are familiar with international affairs that took their threats very seriously. And considering that you can go to the whitehouse.gov and see, or you can go to congress.gov and see the bill that was literally introduced 24 hours ago to annex Greenland into the United States. I personally think that there was probably some validity to it. I think what Canadians are booing overall is not just a single man, but also that man was voted in, won the popular vote, won everything. And so I think they are booing more than just one person. They're saying, and every person that voted for this man too and voted for this chaos, like, no, boo all of America. And so I think in general, I don't know, it's not necessarily that I have a strong opinion about it. Outside of, it would also, if America did invade, it would be a direct violation of NATO, and it would technically send us into potentially
it wouldn't happen.
That's World War III. But
like it wouldn't happen. And
yeah.
So
all of that to say, also, I think in general, it's never been an issue. And this is the reason why I think they were deterred by it, is that it's never been an issue invading a country. Invading a country is the easy part. It's like what Seinfeld said about reservations. It's like, I don't think you do. See, anybody can just take a reservation. It's the holding of the reservation that's the important part. And that's the exact same thing with an invasion. Anybody can invade and can surprise a country and take, not anybody, but a superpower can. It's the holding of the country and the occupation that you can't do when the will of the people in your own country are not for it. And when the will of nobody's for it here.
There's just nobody for that in America or Canada.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think
that's why it's like a weird thing to me. It's like we're just arguing about this hypothetical that is not real.
I think what Donald Trump does is I think he puts out feelers for stuff to see how people respond. And then depending on people respond is how he proceeds. And I don't think anybody was on board with it's like, and I'm not even trying to trash Canada, but it's like, yo, it's cold as a mug out there. What we want with Canada? Like, I'm not even, it's like, I know they got resources and stuff, but it's like, y'all, let the Canadians, that's a different culture. That's a different way of life, like very different than the way it is in America. And it's like, I don't think anybody would want it. And it's not the invasion that is the hard part. It's the occupying. And you don't have any popular support internally in America to do that. And you wouldn't be able to hold Canadians. Like, are you kidding?
Yeah. I will speak from just someone who grew up in Taiwan and, all my life. There's always the threat that China's gonna take over and make Taiwan theirs. Just that language. This is something you hear from your teachers, your parents, to all the way to the government officials. So, like, I think when you get taught at that way, your pride gets stronger. Like your Taiwan, for me, like my Taiwanese pride become even more in alignment. Like, yeah, like no, we're gonna fight for Taiwan. Like we're gonna die on this island. Like that kind of language, like very extreme language. Because you want to protect, because we are different. We are our own country. So, but when you hear that narrative that this place is bigger, this place is bigger, they have more resources, they have every reason to take us, in their mind, we don't like to feel belittled, even though we are a small island. So I think that language, I can see what, maybe Ben and all the Canadians like don't talk to us like that. Especially the difference between Taiwan and China is we're not allies as much as America is allies with Canada.
Right.
So I think that's what's different. And also, obviously, Taiwan say, we vote for our own presidents, freedom of speech, very different political system in comparison with China. So I don't know. I think there's way more like tensions there compared to US and Canada, because
exactly That's the other
China
thing
wants
for
Taiwan
me with this. Yes, is that like
because
there really are countries in this world at threat of being taken over by other countries, and yet we have these petty disputes over here talking about fake hypotheticals. It's ridiculous. Like in Taiwan, that's a real conversation.
Yeah.
That's not a joke. That's not a oh, I hate Americans because of this idea
and I
that
think
isn't even real, that nobody thinks is real.
And I think it was also different. Like, and right now, what Taiwan has, that's the headline. There's a lot of different things, but the overall headline that's protecting Taiwan from a invasion is because they have the chip, and that is the way to win the AI race for Western countries, because that's something China doesn't have right now. Because if they have that, when you look at like the next few decades, a lot of different resources race will be US's won't be as ahead as they would like to be. I wanted to do also like what I think is so interesting about this game, the hockey, is US and Canada are so passionate about hockey, and they haven't seen their best players in their national uniform and competing at a high level in a long time. So during Beijing 2022 for the Olympic Winter Games, NHL season actually overlaps with the Olympic Games, so they actually didn't let the NHL players play. So you're seeing great players. I'm not discrediting them, but it's like not seeing LeBron, KD, and Curry on Team USA. Like, hey, we have great teammates there, but we know it's not our A team. So I think that's kind of what made this game so much even more invested from viewers, is because you're seeing these all-star players that are from the pros fighting. And I think that's what I'm going to transition to, is the sports marketing aspect. Is that's what separates between what happened that game and the NBA All-Star weekend. You want to see the players passionate about the game because the fans are passionate.
Yeah.
You know, Jack, it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I actually caught some of that NBA All-Star game, and I watched some of I don't even know what it was. I've never seen like NBA players that looked like they were playing like pick or something, or like one of those, like a basketball game that you would play with like your friends, but it's not a basketball game. It's like, what's it called?
They have a lot of different events and stuff throughout the All-Star weekend.
So I watched the All-Star game, and then I watched some of the events, and I could not help but think, like, this is so boring. Like, what is going on? Yeah. And it was my first time ever tuning into it. So in comparison, I mean, was that I don't know if I just don't know enough about basketball, or was that a general sentiment from everybody? Go ahead.
No, it's definitely a general sentiment that the NBA as a property has not figured out a solution for the All-Star weekend. Their viewership went down 13% from last year, which is already super low. So they do have like a problem they still aren't able to solve yet. But what I'm trying to get at is people just want to see real competition and the best people competing at the best. So it's hard to do that, when it comes to NFL pro balls, MLB baseball, like All-Star game, NBA, like there's not as much incentive, I would say, for those players. But when you put your country's in front of your chest and you're wearing the number, like you're playing for something way bigger. And a lot of the Sweden and Finland, the other two teams who are in this four-nation face-off tournament, they absolutely loved the game. And one of them they said like, when you represent your country, it's not comparable to All-Star game or pro ball. It's game 7 every night. Yeah. Like when you wear your country in front of your jersey. So, but yeah, I feel like this is something that the other properties need to look at, like NBA. Like, look at what they did. They just put all their all-stars in their country's uniform and they play against each other. This could be the same thing for baseball or NFL. Obviously, it's not there yet, but like from a sports marketing standpoint, like this is huge because that game on Saturday night was one of those games that could inspire a ton of generations because that passion is something like people love about sports. And tomorrow night, when they play it again, and who knows what's going to happen in the national anthem in Boston in TD Garden, but I just know that Canadians' favorites
Boston.
is in Boston.
Yeah, like Boston sports fans
city.
in a hockey city. Yeah.
So it is going to be
on
probably
site.
the most watched hockey game in a long time. And this is a great build-up for the next Winter Olympics, which is going to be in Milan Cortina. And NHL has signed off that their players can play there.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, any final thoughts about this? You know, just what we talk about from the political tensions to the competition itself and the fights. Like, what do you want to see next? Like, do you want to see a fight on Thursday? Like, do you guys want to see that? I personally want to see it because as a sports fan, hockey is the best place to do that.
For sure.
I won't be tuning in. But
that's crazy.
I'm not a hockey fan, and I definitely am not a hockey fight fan. I get it. I get the appeal, but for me, like, I don't know, man. I don't want to watch. Like, just play the game, you know? Like,
that's the game, though. That's part of it's written. They literally have rules. That's a ref. That's part of the game, and I think that's why it's so
I will say that I don't get that at all. Like in our rules,
I don't get it.
You just drop your gloves and square up with each other and try to knock each other's teeth out. That is crazy to me. I do think that that's so obnoxious.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not with the fighting, but I'm biased because I don't like violence. I don't like fighting anyway. And also, like, they got enough brain damage in hockey with all the hitting and all the, like, it's such a dangerous sport. And then now they're going to be swinging at each other's heads too. It's like, not a game for me, but I dig the passion and I understand that, you know, when they see each other tomorrow night, like, it's on site, they're gonna fight, it's gonna get crazy, it's in Boston, and yeah.
One final thing is, when it comes to US fans, I do like, while there's we all agree on, like, this sentiment of like taking over another country like Canada or Greenland, like, I don't think for most American we agree with that in this type of language. It's, you know, this violent language. But I do think US do appreciate seeing their best players giving their best on the competition floor. So yeah, should be a good game. And, you know, if something happens, we'll talk about it. But yeah, if nothing happens, then, you know, I'm glad we talk about this, you know, from Saturday.
Yeah. So I guess kind of like switching over to the next topic, we've talked extensively about Canada today, which is, you know, I guess like a half of my identity, right? From my background. For the listeners who don't know, I'm a citizen of two countries, Canada and Rwanda. So half my life I grew up in Canada, the other half I grew up in East Africa. And so that kind of like two-sided nature of me is very important to me. It really, the blend of those two different cultures really is what makes me who I am. And because of that, it's made me, growing up, have to do a lot of deep thinking about, like, my culture, my ethnicity, and kind of some of those themes, which we've talked about a little bit on the podcast before, and we've talked about extensively off the podcast between the three of us. So I guess just like for the listeners, I'm gonna point you out, Caleb. I'd like to know, like, how do you describe yourself, like, ethnically, racially, What would you say like is your background?
So
And this isn't a trap in any type of way.
Yeah, no, I'm following it. Ethnically, I would say I'm black, because ethnically I'd say I'm black because that's the way in which the world interacts with me. The world interacts with me as if I'm a black man. When I was playing football with an all white team, I was called the N-word like relentlessly. So it's like the world views you as black.
That's
And
crazy.
so, dude, you want to talk about crazy stuff? Talk about leaving the inner city of Columbus and going to a rural school like 25 minutes outside of Columbus. And the first time that people like look at you, they call you Blackie Chan because they don't have any black people in their class. Craziness. I'd say the world interacts with me as if I'm a black man. So like my biracial status, I would say racially, I would consider myself biracial because my mom was black, my dad's white. But I identify as black because that's how the world interacts with me.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Now, on that note, I notice you called yourself a black man. You did not call yourself an African American man.
Yeah.
And I guess now is kind of a little bit more of the development of that. I'm curious, like, and starting with you, Jack, like did you grow up hearing the term like African American, or like when did you first start hearing these terms? How do you feel about them? Like what is your relationship to like black or African American or any of those types of terms?
Well, growing up in Taiwan, I'm not exposed to people from a ton of racial background. So,
they ain't got no black Taiwanese people.
Look,
ain't no black folk in Taiwan.
When we see,
it's a small island, Caleb.
When we see, we call it Blasian. It's like the parents, one is black, one is Asian. So that's like one of the most. When I travel, I'm talking about the most rarest form of kids who are mixed. And the most of the time, they're also the most attractive form of it's crazy. But anyways, no, I would say when I went to the American school in Taiwan, that's more of like that conversation happening just because why we didn't have anybody from Africa or America who were black. Like there was definitely conversation because social media is growing. I'm being online more, so like that's more of the exposure, but not as much exposure until like I came to the United States for college. Like my first roommate on a random was black American. So like that's honestly when I was at Asbury, that's when a lot of those conversations I started to like immerse myself in, like, okay, like what is the difference? Like why do when I talk to my friends from African countries, they're culturally they're very different than people who grew up in America. So I think culturally there's differences, upbringings, but I think there's definitely a lot of conversations I'm so curious about, like maybe how African Americans feels about Africans in America. Like there's just so much to unpack there. Because I went to the house of somebody from Kenya, it's a very different house than when I went to someone who from America who's black. So I don't know. That's kind of how I guess I don't have a feel about a term. It's just more like I just know they're different in terms of like the culture, the family, the pride, and honestly even like how they feel about one another too. So Kayla, you probably get
So I wanna like side conversation because you just unlocked a core memory for me. When I was at Asbury, I actually had a roommate who was white, but he was from South Africa. Okay. And when he was explaining, he was like, "Oh yeah," he was like, "I was like, yes, like, what does your like family do in South Africa?" And this person starts basically saying that his family is like in the South African government. And they were like, yeah, my great great grandfather was the governor of this like province. And if you know anything about South Africa, it's like they invented a new word for that kind of racism. They call that like the apartheid down in South Africa. Crazy. And so I'm like, yo, granddaddy was a what?
You were part of that?
And he was like, oh, but here's the thing. He started trashing on America. And he was like, South Africa is just so much better. Like, I love this. And I'm sitting here like, now, one thing I won't do is listen to slander from the good old US of A. She might be raggedy, but she's mine, dang it. So I'm like, well, they invented like a new word for like what y'all was doing down there, don't you? And he's like, oh, no. And this was the phrase that I was like, really? He goes, we were really good to our Black people. And brother, I said, do you hear yourself? You just took ownership of a human life in 2019. And he was like, I'm not talking about this anymore. Walks out of the door. I was like, oh, It was 4:00. Wow. I put together a PowerPoint presentation for him. And he walked back in at midnight thinking that I was going to be asleep. He got up on that top bunk. I turned that TV on. Laptop was already plugged into that HDMI. I said, let's get educated here while we're at it. You think I came to play? You asked the wrong person. He didn't room with me after that semester, and we didn't talk to each other after that. But yeah, no, homeboy was straight up like, we're really good to our Black people. And then he said this statement. What would they do? He was like, well, they need us to help them run the government and everything. And I was like, he was like, well, what would they be doing if we weren't helping them running their government? And I literally screamed at the top of my lungs, running their own country without you. Like, craziness. I'm not 100% familiar with all of the intricacies of how that works out, but I'll just say that was the last time that we had a major conversation. And that was one of my experiences at a certain university.
Wow. So Caleb, then, so how do you feel about like the term like African American? Is that something that makes sense to you? Did you grow up with that? Like,
so I think we all grew up with it, and it sort of started being phased out primarily because you can't tell by looking at somebody all the time if they're African American or if they are like just African. And so it's like it's such a specific label. Mm-hmm. And within an ethnic context within America, you have to look at how America has chosen to interact with race throughout its history. And that is that for the most part, there was white, mulatto, and Black. Right? And these are the categories in which our society has been trained to understand how to interact with people. And so the institutions that exist don't think to themselves, you're African or you're African American, because we have made skin color so prevalent in this country. I think the blanketed phrase, whether it is for our detriment or whether it is for our benefit, has just turned into Black because of like the broader concept of a Black like diaspora or something like that, mm-hmm. So I would think for myself, I use the term Black Americans. There's also a good portion, I think, of people that are of African like direct descent or have immigrated here or live in Africa that would prefer to say I am African and I am from this specific country, because again, we don't want to overgeneralize Africa. There are I don't know the exact number, but there are so many different countries in Africa and so many different ethnicities and people groups that even just saying, oh, you're African or you're African American, it's just a massive generalization, I think. And so I think, and then in the exact same sentence, calling everybody Black is at the same time. So I don't know if you win or if you lose in the conversation. I don't know if I have the strongest feelings about it.
Yeah, no, I think sort of similarly to you, except the difference being that this is only really a term that I've had to like get familiar with in the last, 7 years or so of living here in America. Actually, when I first moved to America, like I had someone say like, for us like African Americans, And then I interrupted him and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you were African. Where are you from?" And he said, "What?" And
Mhm.
he was so confused, right? Because like to me, when you say African, you mean Africa. Like
Yeah.
I grew up in Africa. Like I'm like you ask me where you from, I'll tell you Rwanda. Like that is on my passport. Like and so that to me, I always thought the term African American literally meant like to me like I'm Rwandan Canadian, so I thought maybe it's just like a term like for Americans who grew up in Africa or that kind of thing. Come to find out, no, it was just a term for like all Black Americans, right? And so to me that thought was like a little bit confusing when I first got here. And I guess like throughout different points in American history, there have been certain times where like Americans of African descent have been trying to like reintegrate with their like heritage, right?
Right.
So, all that to introduce Sombra City, Ghana. Um
Hold up, hold
and
up. Before you go into that, I don't know if you have the answer, and I'm just curious. I think it's interesting. Like, for example, hey, I'm Korean American.
yeah,
I'm Taiwanese American.
right.
I'm Japanese American.
So you see when you
So,
say
so,
all those
so
things, you know what
first
that
is
person means.
yeah. So first is like, hey, I'm Kenyan American or Ghana American. Like, I guess why. Like, has that ever been a frustration for you? Just like how generalized, like how
No, because
yeah.
now like I get what they mean. They don't mean African at all. They just mean black. And so that's why to me that term doesn't fully make sense.
Okay.
Um and I get the sentiment behind it and I get where it comes from. But like Caleb mentioned, like we're at a point in history where like
These are
culturally there are no similarities. Like
distinctly different people groups.
yes. Okay. So, all that to say, they are now starting up this city in Ghana, which is a country in West Africa. Um, and this city is called Sombra City. And it was started by a group of Black Americans who went to the Ghanaian government about building a city to spur economic development in Ghana and encourage Black people from all over the world to return home to the motherland. That was their quote, right? So the Ghanaian government agreed to give them a 300-acre residential community just outside of the capital city as kind of a trial run, aiming to reconnect the African diaspora with their roots. Um, this is like a huge project, and its expected completion is in the fall of 2027. But they have goals of sustainable living, building an eco-friendly city, and economic growth, cultural connection. It's going to be a place with a bunch of green homes, amenities like sports facilities, co-working spaces, bike lanes, grocery store, investment opportunities. And so this is just it perfectly aligns with Ghana's 2030 goal, of which they're calling the year of return, which also, side note, Sanbra means the return in Akan, which is one of the local languages in Ghana. Um, and so this is a whole movement that is now starting up. And I guess firstly, I want to hear like, what do you guys think about this idea? Because it shocked me when I heard this.
So I've been following some. I've been following a couple of influencers on TikTok since like 2020 at this point that are Nigerian American, Ethiopian American, Ghanaian American, that are just wonderful accounts that I love, and they all go to this thing called Dedi December in December, which is basically like almost like a 2 week party where basically there's just like nothing but nightlife for like 2 weeks,
Yeah, in
right?
Nigeria.
Yes, in Nigeria. And I actually really, really want to go this year because I mean I was saving to try and buy tickets last year, and I had the money towards like the end of November, and I was like and like you couldn't get a flight. Like you couldn't get a flight. Like there just wasn't possible. And so now I'm trying to buy flights by like May this year because I would genuinely love to go to Dedi December just because it's just embodies like everything that I believe life should be about, which is sharing culture, having fun, saying we are taking a portion of our year and dedicating it to letting the good times roll amongst people that are like minded. And yes, there are like logistical issues, like how do you get around and that kind of stuff. Like if you can't drive in that country and they don't have as many Ubers and like the currency exchange can be a little more difficult, but I've always wanted to go to that for like the last like 4 or 5 years. I shouldn't say always. Last 4 or 5 years, I've really wanted to go to that. And so I've started seeing more of this as my TikTok has had more of an African like influence on it. And I personally think it's going to be a great trial run because when you think about other like countries or spaces that have been put together, as long as they're not centered, I think around like a religion or something like that, I think typically it goes okay. I think it'll be interesting to see how other people interact with the people who have relocated there. I will say this, I have probably since educating myself on Africa in college, I would say it's been a dream of mine to at some point live in Africa at some point and feel that return. I do like love the Christian faith, but I also there's a little part of me that really does believe in like the Bible talks about like the like an angel of hosts and a cloud of witnesses, right? Which I think personally makes mention of like our ancestors like cheering us on and that kind of stuff. I would love to, at some point in my life, spend a certain period of my time living in Africa. Where my thoughts immediately go is, would it be safe for somebody like me as an LGBTQ person who is out and proud and in a relationship? And the answer to that, as of right now, I think is no. It would not be the safest for me to be there and to live my authentic life. So I am encouraged by this news and by this like motion. I think it's a wonderful olive branch to African Americans, lol, to Black Americans who feel very just disconnected and unloved here in this country. And if there are people that are like open arms and return back to the motherland, like I'm not against it. I don't know if I've thought about all of the backlash and that kind of stuff yet, but on the surface, I think it's at least an interesting idea to entertain.
Man, that's great. I will. When I came to US and it was like 2 years away from living in Taiwan. So I lived there for 17 years and going to a small town in Wilmore. Where one, it's a very culturally different place. Things shut down at 8 p.m. The food is different. There's not a lot of opportunity to speak Mandarin. There's only 4 Taiwanese students on campus. So I remember when I went back to Taiwan first time after 2 years, like there's definitely that like, okay, there's a part of me I haven't felt like, or I've been expressed since I've been in the US. And that's like the language part, and so I don't know what that's like for, somebody who lives in the US all their life and, all the generation, like, I guess if they're missing that part of like, hey, I want to feel, I don't know, just it's a pride to me. Like when I go back to Taiwan, it's like, okay, I lived here. Like this is part of who I am. I want that people to feel that way about where they live right now and where, home is for them.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to, this. I think what you shared, Ben, like, I mean, on paper, it sounds like a great idea, but I think the miss for me is it's the people. You need to know the people.
Yeah.
And I think while there's a chance to meet people there, I think going somewhere where people know you is also very important. So
Yep.
I don't know what this delivered that thing they're trying to connect to. And I think there is opportunity to do that, but I think we all know like people is what matters the most, and places. And I think that's just Caleb for me, like someone who live so many different. I mean, Ben, you can speak to this. Like home, oftentimes is not a place. It's most of the time people where they are at right now. So right now it might be Ottawa for you, Ben, but it also might be Wilmore in some capacity.
Yeah,
So
totally. No, I think you bring up a lot of good points, and I think I feel very similarly. When I was prepping for this topic, when I was reading on it, I was going back and forth on how I feel about it so much, and I still feel very ambiguous about it. Or like man, there are some positives. I think I love this like idea. I I love the goals that Ghana has for its economic development, and I think this is an awesome strategy for them to address those. I think it's sweet, and I've seen some of the plans of it. The mock-ups are awesome. Um, it's a cool concept. Where I think the issue really lies is more on that cultural side of things. Like, I personally am not super familiar with Ghanaian culture. Back in Canada, I have some West African friends. I have particularly even some Ghanaian friends, but they are very different even from how we are in East Africa. And I think even for myself as an African, it would be really hard for me to move to Ghana and just start a new life there. And I've lived in Africa half my life. Now, for an American who's lived in America their entire life to go pick up and move to Africa, I think they have some kind of romanticized idea of what that experience would be like. And to be honest, it sometimes is like almost like an offensive idea to me of like they have this. I've heard in this conversation and from some of the voices that I've seen talk about this, there's like this weird cultural appropriation undertone, and it's I'm gonna get some flack for saying it, and I'm cool with that. But if other people were doing this same idea, it would be seen as cultural appropriation. But when Black Americans do it, they can get away with it. For example, you can see Black Americans walking around the streets everywhere wearing all kinds of different African patterns that may have a cultural significance to that culture that it comes from, right? And to an American, they're just wearing it because they think it's a cool design. To me, I don't see how that's any different than cultural appropriation. Black Americans have their own culture. It's a very strong culture. It's a very loved culture. It's literally the most imitated culture on the face of the planet. And yet so many of them feel like they have to go like reaching for this other culture that is not theirs, that they did not grow up in, and they there's a huge disconnect. And so I think that like to think that you're just going to be able to move to some other country and make it your home, it can lead to a lot of problems. And I mean, I personally, like, I've seen it like in East Africa. I've seen Black Americans move to Rwanda or Kenya or Uganda or Burundi or Tanzania or Ethiopia. I can name country after country where I've seen this happen and it doesn't go well. And I just, man, I hope the best for this community. I hope it can work out. But to be honest, I don't
wow.
I don't think that it's super realistic, because I think what's going to end up happening is they're just going to want to bring their own subset of America within another country, and that just doesn't fly. It's just going to be its own little segregated area outside of Ghanaian culture and Ghanaian society. So I think to me, it's like that's there's not really I don't see the benefit culturally there. So those are some of my thoughts about it. And again,
No, thanks for sharing
it's a
that,
complex
because
topic.
this is
So
such a complex topic. Because I, hearing what you and Caleb share, like there's different that like personal desire, but then also as in your case, like you've seen that happen before. I think the thing that comes to my mind is sometimes, and I might also get flack for this, like because I grew up locally in Taiwan. Like I went to their school, I went to the public school, I
not in the
went to the
American
church.
school, right?
Yeah, so like most of my life, I also live in the south part of the island, the rural part of the island, with the Aboriginal village. So like a lot of times, people feel like I'm more Taiwanese than they are, even though they are from Taiwan. Growing up, and I do remember like as I'm going to the American Christian school, like they it's just an off-putting feeling that they're not truly accepting Taiwan for what it is. Like they're just making a like American bubble inside of Taiwan.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's how you're feeling about what if when what you've seen,
No, it
like
kind of
people
is. Yeah,
just
it kind
like
of is.
it's not like so but at the same time, like how do you that's such a hard thing to navigate, because I can't blame these in this, for example, like these American staff or Canadian staff to like fully understand Taiwanese culture the first week this or first year they get there. But I think there's something to say, like when you live there 7 years and you still don't speak a lick of the language or celebrate all the culture that Taiwanese celebrate, like the traditions and whatnot. I think that's a very different thing. So I think the time does play a part in this, Ben. Like
Yes. I was
if
gonna
you
say
if
that.
you go there for a year or a few months, I think that's you should expect that from anybody. Like they're not fully gonna immerse or they're just gonna be navigating. But if they're living there for like 5+ years, then that conversation of like, okay, like you're you're changing, you're making this more of what you were from before. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think on top of that too, the era that we live in also plays a role, right? Like
Mm,
we now live in a more globalized world than ever before. So, if there ever was a time for this kind of a movement, it's now. And this kind of thing is the future. Like I think the lines of culture are going to continue to be blurred as time moves forward and everything becomes more interconnected through the internet and through
yeah.
technology. And so maybe I look back at what I'm saying right now in 10 years and I'm like, man, I was so stupid. Those people were ahead of the time. And I think that is a very very possible situation. But just for today, as I
Yeah.
see it, I'm like, I don't know if the world's ready for that.
Hey, I'll tell you this right now, though. If Japan has this program, already know I'm going to be there. You already know so many people are going to be there. Because again, there's this like romanticized idea of
Yeah,
Japan, but then when it comes to working there and
right.
the dating culture that we talked about, guys,
Mm-hmm.
like that's the first like that's it just separates like the world of like um what's real and what's like a generated place inside Japan. So I don't know,
Yeah.
Caleb. When you hear Ben talk about this, like um any like just like follow up thoughts, I guess just hearing that perspective, because I feel like what you share is definitely I could see so many people having that. Like it totally makes sense to like I want to reconnect with my, in your words, like mother country, like motherland. um
Yeah, I just there's a couple things that you said earlier on, Ben, that just sort of like literally stopped me in my tracks, like just because I just thought it was so wild, like when you said that that like black culture is like so beloved, and like and black culture is the culture, but black Americans face so much violence like to this day that Yeah, like, yeah. I mean, there. I have a lot of thoughts.
And do you think Africans do not? I don't think it has to do. I think it has to do with race, not culture.
So
I think all black people in America. I experience having not grown up in America. I've been called the N word,
right,
and I grew up in Africa, and so I don't think that that's a black American thing. I don't think that's
right,
a cultural thing. I think
which
that's
is
a
the
race thing.
appeal, which is the appeal of Black Americans to go to a place where you're surrounded by other people, where that hopefully at least if we disagree on culture and how we act and that kind of stuff, that's different. But to be able to exist in a place where somebody's not saying, I hate you because of the color of your skin. And I'm not, and I know that racism also exists like globally. Like I get that. But yeah, no, I guess as a Black
I can
American,
just tell you that as an African, you will have people in Africa that will tell you they hate you because of your culture, not because of the skin color. And that I can tell you from lived personal experience. That
right,
in
which,
Africa, they are welcoming people in most countries. It's great, but also they don't want outsiders staying there always. Like there are lines, there are boundaries.
and there's no place for Black Americans in this world to feel safe, I guess. And I guess my memories immediately go to my Black grandmother who can't talk about police without crying. My thoughts go to my Black grandmother who tells a story of a cousin who was playing baseball against an all white team. And after they beat the team, he was the pitcher and he struck out everybody on the team that they beat him up, beat him unconscious, and threw him into an active well and covered him over with cement. And so stories like that are built into our DNA and plague us. And so on the surface, and I'm a little emotional about this only because it's like there has been so much violence in direct violence, like the story that I just shared, in that is literally just passed down just like a couple of generations. And the thought that there could be a place where we could be viewed as humans, because in America, Black Americans are oftentimes excluded from being viewed as even human. I think, yeah, it makes me, yeah. I have a lot more thoughts, but I just think on the surface, like the yeah,
Do you think that going to Africa would be a solution to that?
I think it could
You
be
I mean, you
eventually.
said it
I'm not.
yourself, Caleb. You said it yourself, Caleb. You are an LGBT, you are a gay man, and do you feel like, and you said it, that you would not feel safe there? And I can tell you, having lived in Uganda for 5 years,
Yeah.
like they do not treat gay people well in Uganda, and that's not a good thing. That's not something I want to
Right.
celebrate. But I can tell you that when I was in Uganda, I heard stories of gay people in the capital city, not like way out in the village, getting burned in tires just for being gay.
And
And
I'm and I
so
don't I'm not saying that
I'm not saying there's a
you're
perfect
even
place.
wrong. I'm not even saying that you're wrong. I'm just
Yeah.
saying like I'm
No,
taken
no, I
back.
get what you're saying. I'm just
It's
saying
like
that
it just like
I agree
saddens
with you.
me.
Yeah. Oh no,
You
I
know,
agree with you.
it saddens me because America in many ways has stopped feeling like home for me. Like, oof. America is just like, it's a very, when you're getting frisked in Louisiana for not wearing a seatbelt, like when you are getting frisked and your car searched at 21 because you are in the deep south and the only infraction against you is you're not wearing a seatbelt, like just memories like that and like stuff like that, it's like, and then this hearing the story, I guess, and I want to be very clear here, I'm not offended with anything that like Ben has said specifically. It's more of like, I guess the points that you've brought up are so valid that it's just brought up a sorrow inside of me of, then where is home, where it's just
I
like
think you nailed. I think you hit the nail on the head when you
Totally.
said like, "Are Black Americans safe anywhere?" Right?
it's
Like
just like it just
that
it
is the
brings me
sentiment,
great
right?
sadness, you know, like it's like I just think of my family and I think of my, it's just, there's a lot of sadness baked into the Black experience in America, like organically. And I guess like hearing that story, like and even like feeling inundated and a little bit of like African talk has given me like this hope. And I guess I've in this moment that hope has kind of been taken away, so I'm a little sad, but is what
That
it
wasn't
is.
my intention. Wasn't to do that. My intention was just that, like, to bring the reality to the situation of like, I I fear that people have this idea of moving to Africa that is not real,
Yeah.
and that, and I love Africa. Like, I want to, retire there when I'm old. Like, but I think that, like, if Black people think that they're going to move to Africa and have some kind of deep sentiment of connection and home, maybe, but I think it's unlikely because the experience is so different. And Caleb, I think you're totally right. Like, that a lot of those like very painful, difficult things are ingrained into the Black experience in America. But I think one of the best parts of the Black culture in America is how they can flip that on its head. And this is something that I've heard you talk about numerous times, of turning horrendous situations into beauty. And I think that that is like part of the strength of Black culture in America that isn't celebrated enough. And that getting away from that actually is like diminishing that overcoming that is like happening in the last two generations.
All I'll say to sort of wrap this up from my perspective is, Ben, I agree with you. Black people consistently turn rotten lemons into limoncello pie, into great things, but we're tired of having to because of white people's racism. Period. Full stop. We're tired of it. It's like the culture is tired of having to be strong. So I agree with you. It's just like, yeah, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. Jack, any final thoughts?
No, I love the conversation we had today. And I think, we displayed, I mean, that's such a topic that's so close to our hearts, and especially for you two. And honestly, just, I feel like the best, luckiest fly in the wall to observe that. I think we just gotta keep asking questions. We gotta keep coming back to this, because this is not a conversation that ends today. And I definitely see how this trial evolves. Because if there's a successful story that comes out of it, great.
Yeah,
But if it brings up more bigger issues, which is what I think what we did today, then how, what is the root of the issues, which I also think we highlighted as well. And yeah, we get, yeah. So that's what I'll say for my final thoughts.
yeah, totally. I mean, hey, best wishes to Sombra City. I think the idea is dope. And hey, if it can be successful, I'm a fan, and I'll come visit you guys for real, because I still haven't made it out to West Africa myself. So, as always, listeners, thank you for joining us today. We hope this episode brightened your day, made you think a little bit. We really appreciate that you were here, joining us and building this community with us. If you liked the episode, rate us 5 stars and share it with a friend. Follow us on social media at Generation Varied, and shoot us a DM or an email at generationvaried@gmail.com with any ideas or thoughts that you'd like to hear us discuss in future episodes. We look through all of those, and we really appreciate it when you do that. We could not do this without you. We'll talk to you again next week.